Chapter 38. Chapter 38 of Genesis. Getting on through it. In this chapter, you'll see names like Tamar, Perez, Zerah, and Judah. They may sound familiar because if you look at the book of Matthew in the first chapter, you will see they're listed in the lineage of Christ. So it's amazing that you look at Christ as being, the Savior, and then you look at people in his lineage who are messed up. So God doesn't look at the fact that people make mistakes. God's still going to use people in spite of those mistakes. And this chapter, as you look at it, it's kind of like right in the middle here of Joseph and Joseph. Chapter 37 is about Joseph. Chapter 39 is about Joseph. Right in the middle of Joseph's story, God throws in Judah's story. And it's a strange chapter when you read it and you study it. And it's strange that it's even in the middle of Joseph's story. But I believe the reason that God has placed the story of Judah's descendants right in the middle here is because he wants us to understand that's where the lineage of Christ comes from. He wants us to understand Judah's descendants, so as we get to the New Testament and we see the lineage of Christ, we have a backstory of where they came from and what their story was. So, as I said, this is a difficult, not really difficult, I guess. It's something that's hard to understand, but it's difficult to see how it applied to the rest. So I believe that's the reason it's here, is because of letting us see that Judah's descendants, since Christ's descendants come from Judah's line or Christ's lineage. So let's pick up in verse 1. It said, "It came to pass at that time that Judah went down from his brethren and turned into a certain Adullamite whose name was Hira." Now, the only thing I know about Adullamite is they were from the land or the city of Adullam, which was one of the 32 cities of Canaanite, or of the Canaan land. Don't know much about them. I tried to Google it. I tried to, AI. I tried to everything. Not much to know about this Adullamite. But the name was Hira, and he came to them and turned to them, and I guess he began to communicate with them during this journey here. It says, "And Judah saw there was a daughter of a certain Canaanite, whose name was Shua, and he took her and went in unto her." You will see that out of, my mind just went blank, Jacob's 12 kids, only 2 were good. And that was Benjamin and Joseph. The other 10 seemed like they were problem children. And all through, as you look at their life, especially here with Jacob. So the only comfort that Jacob could have was he had Joseph and he had Benjamin as the good kids. But at the same time, he was grieving over Joseph because Joseph was where? According to him, he was dead. He didn't know he was still alive. So he was away. So he's trying to grieve over the heartbrokenness of his disappearance. But at the same time, you see the life of his other sons, which is a stark difference from Abraham. Because Abraham, what God said about Abraham in Genesis 18:19, it says, "For I know him, that he will command his children and his household after him, and they shall keep the way of the Lord." You can't say that about Jacob's kids. His kids did not keep the way of the Lord. Shown here by Judah marrying who? Canaanite woman, which was totally not what they were supposed to be doing. So he took her, he went unto her, she conceived and bare a son and called his name What a name, right? Just E-R. And then she conceived again and bare a son, and she called his name Onan. And she yet again conceived, bare a son, and called his name Shelah. And he was at Chizib when she bare him. So let's stop there for a second. The 3 children that she bore here is going to one of these. No, not one of these, sorry. These kids here were born to Tamar. They are going to not go in the way of the Lord. in a good or easy way to put it. So let's see what happens to Onan, and Shelah. Look at verse 6. And Judah took a wife for his firstborn, whose name was what? Tamar. You'll see that name again when you look at Matthew. So marries Tamar. It says, and Judah's firstborn, was what? Wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord slew him. The Lord didn't play around in the Old Testament. But the reason was probably wicked in the sight of the Lord is he didn't have that upbringing from his father, Judah, that taught him to follow in the ways of the Lord. So God slew him. Now, we have to look at something here in the next verse, and then I'll explain what's going on. It says, and Judah said unto Onan, go in unto thy brother's wife, and marry her, and raise up thy seed to thy brother. Now, here's what, we got to understand the context here. In the, I can't remember the exact word, my mind just totally went blank. I got it written down here. In the culture of the Levirate marriage custom, if a man was to die, his brother was to marry his wife and have a child with her. The child that was born, the firstborn child, was to be the son of the deceased brother, so that the lineage of that deceased brother would carry on. So it was kind of like a lineage thing in Bible times was very, very, very important. So the brother, Onan, is told to marry Tamar, which was Er's wife, to produce a child with Tamar, and that child would then be the child of to carry on his family name. Now later on in Deuteronomy, if you want to turn there, I want us to read this. You see that it actually transferred into the law later on in the history of Israel. In Deuteronomy chapter 25 in verse 5, listen to what is said here so we understand a little more that this was, even though it was a custom in the time of Jacob, it later became law concerning relations. It says in verse 5 of Deuteronomy 25, if brethren dwell together, and one of them die and have no child, the wife of the dead shall not marry without unto a stranger. Her husband's brother shall go in unto her, and take her to him to wife, and perform the duties of a husband's brother unto her. And it shall be that the firstborn which she beareth shall succeed in the name of his brother, which is dead, that his name be not put out of Israel. And if the man like not to take his brother's wife, then let his brother's wife go up to the gate unto the elders, and say, my husband's brother refuseth to raise up unto his brother a name in Israel. He will not perform the duties of my husband's brother. Then the elders of his city shall call him and speak unto him. And if he stand to it and say, I like not to take her, then shall his brother's wife come unto him in the presence of the elders, and loose his shoe from off his foot, and spit in his face, and shall answer and say, so shall it be done unto the man that will not build upon his brother's house. And his name shall be called in Israel, the house of him that hath his shoe loosed. So it was a very bad thing not to perform this, I guess you could say, obligation to have a child for your deceased brother. Now let's go on into verse 8. And Judah said unto Onan, go in unto thy brother's wife, and marry her, and raise up a seed to my brother. And Onan knew that the seed should not be his. In other words, would not be his. And it came to pass, when he went in unto his brother's wife, that he spilled it on the ground, lest he should give seed to his brother. To put this plainly, he decided he did not want her to conceive a child. So instead, he allowed that not to happen, which was not a smart move. So it says in verse 10, and the thing which he did displeased the Lord, wherefore, what? He slew him also. You say that's kind of a strict punishment. Remember, lineage is important. God, whether he slew him because of this one instance, we don't know any more details. But we know this, that what he did displeased the Lord. The Lord was not happy that he didn't fulfill his obligation that we see is actually enforced in Deuteronomy in the law, which was not around yet. So we really can't hold him accountable to the law at this point, just to what Judah requested. Just because he didn't uphold that, the Lord slew him. So what are they going to do now? They have one more son, one more brother, right? Then said Judah to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, listen to this, okay? Remain a widow at thy father's house till Shelah, my son, be grown. For he said, lest peradventure he die also, as his brethren did. Tamar went and dwelt in his father's house, in her father's house. I don't think Judah ever intended to give what's his name? Yes, to Tamar. I don't think, because his idea is here, the first one died because he didn't follow the Lord. The second one died because he didn't follow the Lord. What about the third one? What if he chooses not to follow the Lord? Now he's going to die too. So his plan is, let's wait till he gets older. And when he gets older, I will send him unto you, Tamar, and you can have a child with him, which will then be, Er's child. So, being the righteous woman she was and listening to Judah, she went home to her father's house and stayed there as a widow. Let's go on and see what happens next. And in the process of time, the daughter of Shoah, Judah's wife, died. Judah was comforted and went up into his sheep shearers to Timnath, he and his friend Harah the Adullamite. So the daughter of Shua, Judah's wife, has died. He then is comforted, but then goes to the sheep shearers. Now, if you read what a sheep shearer is, it was a time of celebration. They would go shear the sheep, but they would also have like a feast and a party and a time of celebration. So this is a time that Judah's mind is not going to be on what he told Tamar. It's not going to be on the fact that he has only lost two sons. It's going to be on what? Celebration, feasting, the sheep shearing. So Tamar comes up with a plan here. Now let's see what happens next. And it was told Tamar, saying, behold, thy father-in-law goeth up to Timnath to shear his sheep. And she put her widow's garment off from her, and covered her with a veil, and wrapped herself, and sat in the open place, or in the market there, which is by the way through Timnath, for she saw that Shelah was grown. Remember? When you're grown, you'll do what? He'll go in unto you. He's grown now. And she was not given unto him to wife. So she has this plan that she will go and sit where the prostitutes sit. And the reason she will go sit where the prostitutes sit, so when Judah comes by, he'll see her and he'll want her. She takes off the widow outfit. She puts this veil on her so you can't really recognize who she is. She goes and she sits down in the open place where the people who pass by to go to the sheep shear would pass by her. And verse 15 says, when Judah saw her, he thought her to be a harlot because she had covered her face. So he can't see her face. And back then, if you look at a lot of times, a harlot would have this kind of a veil thing over her face. So he didn't know who she was. So he turns unto her by the way. Now this is his daughter-in-law, okay? Go to, I pray thee, let me come in unto thee. Now he wants to bear children with her. For he knew not that she was his daughter-in-law. And she said, what wilt thou give me, that thou mayest come in unto me? And he said, I will send thee a kid from the flock. I'll give you a goat from this flock here, okay? And she said, wilt thou give me a pledge till thou send it? In other words, I want to make sure you keep this promise. She's got a plan here, and we're going to cover that plan in a minute. I want to make sure you keep this promise. So what are you going to give me until you can give me that goat? So that we have this set. He says in verse 18, and he said, what pledge shall I give thee? And she said, the signet, which has his symbol on it. It's like a ring. Thy bracelets and thy staff that is in thine hand. Why does she want his signet? That shows his possession, his bracelet, and his staff. So later on, she can prove it was who that came to her. It was Jake. It was Judah. It was a plan that she had. Setting him up. And he gave it unto her and came in unto her, and she conceived. And she arose and went away. Okay, she went back home, laid the veil from her, put on the garments of her widowhood again. She's back to her normal life again. Going back on. But what is she trying to do? She's trying to carry on the seed. Any way possible. She is, I know it's hard to look at this as righteous, and we'll see later on what it's actually referred to in the scripture. But she's actually doing the thing that should be done. She's carrying on the seed, even if it wasn't a deceptive way. So let's look at what happens. She puts her widowhood back on. And Judah sent the kid by the hand, or the animal, by the hand of his friend to Adulamite to receive his pledge from the woman's hand, and he found her not. Why was she not there anymore? She went back home. Then he asked the men of that place, saying, where's the harlot that was openly by the wayside? And they said there was no harlot in this place. And he returned to Judah and said, I cannot find her. And also the men of the place said that there was no harlot in this place. And Judah said, let her take it to her, lest we be shamed. Behold, I sent this kid, and thou hast not found her. And it came to pass about 3 months after, and it was told Judah, saying, Tamar, thy daughter-in-law, hath played the harlot. And also, behold, she is with child by whoredom. Judah said, bring her forth, and let her be burnt. Looks like he's feeling kind of guilty. Let her be burnt. So let's see what happens, okay? So he says, bring her forth before this group here and let her be burnt. When she was brought forth, she sent to her father-in-law, saying, by the man whose these are, am I with child? And she said, discern, I pray thee, whose are these? The signet, the bracelet, and the staff. She said, by this person who owns this stuff, that's who I'm pregnant with. Why don't you discern whose it is? Look at verse 26. And Judah acknowledged him and said, she hath been more righteous than I, because that I gave her not to Shelah, my son, and he knew her again no more. My thought was, when I was studying this, how could she be called more righteous? She used deception. She, in a way, lied, but she carried on the name. Judah had no intention of giving her the last son, which would have broke the lineage name. Instead, she went and had played the part of a harlot to get Judah to come in with her to carry on that lineage name. Now look how God uses that. Now I'm not saying go out and play a harlot and God will use it for good. Let's see what happens. And it came to pass in the time of her travail, or as she was having a child, that behold, twins were in her womb. And it came to pass when she travailed, that the one put out his hand, and the midwife took and bound up his hand a scarlet thread, since this came out first. Then in Bible times, when one would come out first with twins, they put that scarlet thread on it to represent the lineage, to represent the firstborn, the one with the inheritance. So they were marking that as the firstborn. And it came to pass as he drew back his hand, that behold, his brother came out. And she said, how hast thou broken forth? This breach be upon thee. Therefore his name was called Pharez, which means breach. And afterwards came out his brother that had the scarlet thread upon his hand, and his name was called Zerah. I want you to see something very interesting. Go to Matthew chapter 1. Let me find out where it's at here. All right, go to verse 1. It actually starts at verse 1. Chapter 1 of Matthew 1. The book of the generation of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham begot Isaac. Isaac begot Jacob. Jacob begot Judas and his brethren. And Judas begot Phares and Zerah of Tamar. And Phares begot Esrom. Where does the lineage come from? Zerah, the firstborn, or what's his name? Perez, the one who God made the firstborn. The lineage comes from Perez, who God made the firstborn. They made Zerah the firstborn. God made Perez the firstborn. I've always heard that story there about the scarlet thread, but until I actually studied it more, it's like didn't really know what it meant. But it was the showing the inheritance, the firstborn. It shows me that we as humans, sometimes we can't change God's plan. God's got a plan, he's going to accomplish it. They tried to change it. God said, The baby pulled his hand back, and the other one breached out. And that was where the lineage of Christ comes from. So that's just an amazing story. Yeah. I mean, I know it's kind of like crazy. How is that chapter even in the middle of all of that? But when you study it and you see the story of it, it's just like, wow. I mean, God's hand through all of history